a sukkah is so many different things that I think is important to this work. Like on the one, like very like basic literal sense, a sukkah is like it's a frail shelter, right? And sitting in the sukkah reminds us how frail a lot of people's relationship to shelter is. It is open to the elements. It is temporary. It is, yeah, and that so many people's lived reality in the city of Chicago and in the broader world that I think it's a good like visceral reminder to sit in the sukkah that that's what people's life, and that for the vast majority of us, we get to go back inside, you know, to sleep, and we get to go back inside at the end of these 8 days and have our permanent home, and a reminder that but it is to have to keep in mind that so many people don't have that. But a sukkah is like more than that too. Like a sukkah is something that we build intentionally and collectively as like a community space, as a boon, as like a good for the community, and that as a model for like how do we build social change, something that we come together and make and use and sit in and be in and beautify together. I feel like it is a model for the type of collective work that we need to do to like make real change in our society. And then like lastly, a sukkah is a welcoming space, right? Like we welcome our neighbors in, we welcome our ancestors in, we welcome in their sort of like spirits and qualities, and sort of the practice of welcoming the Ushpizin. And that as a model and a reminder for the fact that like we need to be creating welcoming spaces. Like I'm thinking about, again, like about all of these migrants who are coming into Chicago and New York and all of these other places. We need to like be thinking like, how do we welcome them? What sorts of structures do we welcome them into? What sorts of like both physically and spiritually, emotionally, figuratively, like what kind of a place are we creating for people who have either been unstably sheltered, unstably housed for years, for decades, who have lived here, and people who are coming in newly? How can we create that welcoming space? How can we create shelter that feels permanent and dignified for these folks? And how can we do that collectively and together? So yeah, I think this holiday just offers us so much to chew on, to think about, and to like physically, somatically embody around this work. And I feel, I don't know, like I feel grateful that like this is an opportunity. Like so much is happening around Bring Chicago Home in the next 10 days here in Chicago. Like we will have likely an important hearing and a crucial vote in city council on Bring Chicago Home, like all during or immediately following Sukkot. And sort of to have that opportunity to like be enacting the lessons that we can learn from this holiday and from our practices around this holiday just like feels so powerful. I think something that's really important for me about like doing left Jewish work is not only situating it in real hard text study, but also situating it in a history, a long history, ancient and up to modern, of Jews doing this work, right? And I think being able to connect, like I think something that the program of the fellowship does really well is sort of like help draw that arc, right? Of here's what's in our most ancient texts and what that says. Here's how people, in Talmudic times, in the Middle Ages, whatever, interpreted that and like put it into practice. And then here's how, like Jewish radicals in the 19th and 20th century and into the 21st have like taken that and made examples of it. So like I see I see it sort of as like our duty, not only to do the work, Aleinu l'shabeach, right, but to continue that practice of, I've, with all of these public labor actions recently, I've been thinking a lot about Clara Lemlich and the seamstresses strikes and all of that, and like being able to dig into that history alongside the text, I think just allowed me to sort of just like, have this really comprehensive sense of like how to situate this work. And then in addition to that, I think just being able to build relationships. Like we can't do this work without being in core, good, close relationships. So the opportunity that the fellowship offered folks to build relationships with one another, but then also to build relationships and understand the sort of like movement layout in the city. I was pretty new to Chicago, or recently returned to Chicago when I started it. So being able to sort of have this sort of like landscape of like, okay, here is what the movement ecosystem looks like. Here are going to be some people who can come in and talk to you that you can start to build relationships with, who are really involved with the work. And that I have been able to use some of those relationships, or like that understanding at the very least, if not those relationships, but also those relationships, to inform like, okay, like, how am I building relationships with other people outside the Jewish community, but within the Chicago left, that we need to engage in order to be successful in these campaigns.